Dr. Shimmer floated in the crystal chamber, her transparent body glowing with worry. The research station shook again as another enemy blast hit their shields. Red warning lights flashed across the walls, and the computer voice spoke in calm tones that made everything seem worse. Shield strength at 30%. Hull breach detected on level 7. Evacuation pods offline. Shimmer pressed her crystalline hands against the viewing window. Outside, the massive ships of the Vorthak Empire hung in space like metal predators. Their dark hulls were covered with weapons that glowed red in the darkness. For 3 long cycles, these monsters had attacked the peaceful Zephyrian research station without mercy. The Zephyrians were not fighters. They had evolved on quiet worlds where the biggest danger was a falling rock. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could process light and energy. They spent their lives studying the stars, not making war. But the Vorthak Empire wanted their research, their technology, and their submission. Commander Crystal Song floated into the chamber, his blue light dim with exhaustion. The defensive systems are failing, Shimmer. Our rescue fleets are still months away. We have perhaps 6 standard hours before the shields collapse completely. Shimmer turned from the window. Her mind raced through possibilities, but every calculation led to the same result. The Vorthak would break through their defenses, capture the station, and enslave everyone aboard. Unless... What about the artifact? She asked suddenly. Crystal Song's light flickered with confusion. Which artifact? The dimensional beacon. The one we found in the ruins on Kelthera 3. The ancient writing said it could summon warriors from across the void. The commander's crystal body went completely dark for a moment. This was how Zephyrians showed shock. Shimmer, that technology is completely unknown to us. We have no idea what it might actually do or what might answer such a call. Another explosion rocked the station. This time the lights went out for several seconds before the backup power kicked in. When they could see again, both scientists noticed that the computer was reporting critical failures in 3 more sections. Commander, Shimmer said quietly, what could be worse than certain death and slavery? Crystal Song considered this. The Zephyrians were logical beings who always thought carefully before acting. But logic was telling them that they had no other choices left. Show me the artifact, he said finally. They floated through the station's corridors quickly. Other Zephyrians pressed against the walls to let them pass. Everyone knew time was running out. Children clung to their parents, their small crystal bodies dim with fear. Scientists clutched their research, not wanting to lose their life's work to barbarians. The artifact was kept in the deepest part of the station, in a chamber designed to contain dangerous materials. It looked like a pyramid made of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that hurt to look at directly. The ancient writings found with it were mostly damaged, but the parts they could read spoke of calling the greatest warriors from beyond the stars and summoning those who know no fear. The council must approve this, Crystal Song said, but his voice lacked conviction. They both knew the council was trapped in an emergency meeting, trying to find solutions that did not exist. Shimmer moved closer to the artifact. The writings say it responds to desperate need. It can sense when a civilization faces extinction, and if it summons something worse than the Vorthak, then at least we will die quickly instead of slowly. The station shook again, harder this time. Sparks flew from control panels and they could hear the hull groaning under stress. The computer voice announced that the shields were down to 15%. Crystal Song made his decision. Do it. Shimmer placed her hands on the artifact's surface. The black metal was surprisingly warm, and it seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. She focused her thoughts on their situation, the peaceful researchers facing destruction, the children who would never grow up to see the stars, the knowledge that would be lost forever. The artifact began to glow, not with the clean light of Zephyrian technology, but with something deeper and stranger. The symbols on its surface lit up one by one, creating patterns that seemed to move and shift. A low humming sound filled the chamber, growing louder and more complex. What's happening? Crystal Song asked. I don't know, Shimmer admitted, but I can feel it reaching out, searching for something. The humming became a roar. Energy flowed through the artifact like lightning, creating a field that made the air itself crackle. Both Zephyrians backed away as the pyramid rose into the air, spinning slowly as waves of force poured out of it. Suddenly, everything stopped. The artifact settled back down, its glow fading to a dim pulse. The chamber was silent except for the distant sound of the Vorthak bombardment. Did it work? Crystal Song whispered. Before Shimmer could answer, a new voice filled the station's communication system. It was unlike any Zephyrian voice, deeper, rougher, and speaking in a language their computers had to translate. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress beacon. What's your situation?" Shimmer and Crystal Song stared at each other in amazement. The beacon had worked, but as they rushed to the command center to respond, neither of them realized what they had actually called. The main viewing screen showed space around their station. The Vorthak fleet was still there, still preparing for their final attack. But at the edge of the system, something impossible was happening. New ships were appearing out of nothing, materializing from whatever dimension the beacon had reached into. Not just one ship, or a small squadron. An entire fleet was arriving, ship after ship after ship. The computer counted 50, then 100, then more. They were strange vessels, smaller than Vorthak battleships but somehow more dangerous looking. Their hulls were smooth and white with blue markings that looked almost artistic. "How many ships respond to a distress call?" Crystal Song asked in wonder. The computer finished its count. 127 vessels detected. Classification unknown. Technology unknown. They are moving toward our position at significant speed. Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers again. "Zephyrian Station, this is Admiral Chen. We're reading hostile ships in your area." "Are those the hostiles who called in the distress beacon?" Shimmer activated the communication system with shaking hands. "Admiral Chen, this is Dr. Shimmer of Zephyrian Research Station Kelthera Prime. We are under attack by the Vorthak Empire. They have been bombarding our station for 3 cycles. We are not warriors, we are scientists and researchers. We have no military capabilities." "Understood, Doctor. We're tracking 200 Vorthak vessels surrounding your position. Quite a party they've brought to crash. Don't worry, we'll sort this out." Crystal Song leaned closer to the communication device. "Admiral, we must warn you. The Vorthak Empire has conquered dozens of worlds. Their ships are heavily armed and their crews are ruthless. You may want to call for additional support." There was a pause. Then Admiral Chen's voice returned and they could hear something that sounded almost like laughter in it. "Doctor, we appreciate the warning, but this is the Terran Defense Fleet. We don't really do additional support when civilians are in danger. We just handle the problem." The first human ship came into visual range and both Zephyrians gasped. It was beautiful in a deadly way, like a work of art designed to destroy things. As they watched, the Vorthak fleet began to respond to this new threat, turning their massive guns toward the approaching humans. Admiral Chen's voice filled the station one last time before the battle began. "All Vorthak vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are attacking civilian researchers who pose no threat to anyone. Withdraw your forces immediately, or we will remove them for you. You have 60 seconds to comply." Shimmer looked at Crystal Song, her crystal body glowing brighter with hope than it had in days. "I think," she said quietly, "we may have summoned exactly the right warriors." The battle for Kelthera Prime was about to begin. Commander Scartalon stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath. His reptilian eyes studied the approaching ships with interest, not concern. The Vorthak had crushed every species they had encountered. These new vessels looked primitive compared to Vorthak war machines. "Analysis," he ordered his weapons officer. "Sir, the unknown ships appear to use basic kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion. Their armor looks lightweight. Energy signatures suggest they're running on fusion reactors. Ancient technology." Scartalon's mouth opened in what passed for a Vorthak smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Primitives with outdated weapons. They probably think they're being brave." The communication system activated and the alien voice spoke again. The translator struggled with some concepts, but the meaning was clear enough. "Vorthak forces, I am Admiral Sarah Chen. We are responding to a distress call from the research station you are attacking. These are civilian scientists. Your actions constitute unprovoked aggression against non-combatants. Withdraw immediately and no harm will come to your forces." Scartalon laughed, a harsh sound that made his crew step back. The idea that these soft-looking mammals thought they could threaten the Vorthak Empire was hilarious. "Unknown vessels," he broadcast back. "I am Commander Scartalon of the Vorthak Imperial Navy. You are interfering with a legal conquest of inferior beings. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." On the Zephyrian station, Dr. Shimmer and Commander Crystal Song watched the exchange with growing fear. They had hoped for salvation, but now they worried they had only brought more innocents into danger. The humans don't understand, Crystal Song said. The Vorthak Empire has been conquering worlds for thousands of years. They have weapons that can destroy planets. Shimmer activated their communication system again. Admiral Chen, you must understand, the Vorthak are not reasonable beings. They view all other species as property to be taken. They have enslaved dozens of civilizations. Their ships are much larger than yours. Admiral Chen's voice came back calm and steady. Thank you for the warning, Doctor. We've encountered expansionist empires before. Don't worry, we know how to handle bullies. Scar Talon was growing impatient. These mammals were wasting his time with their pathetic attempts at diplomacy. He had a schedule to keep, and the High Command expected this system to be secured within the cycle. Weapons officer, he ordered. Target 3 of their smaller ships. We'll show them the power of the Vorthak Empire. Perhaps watching their comrades die will make the survivors more reasonable. Yes, sir. Targeting solutions locked. Fire. Bright energy beams lanced out from the Dominion's wrath toward 3 human destroyers. The Vorthak crew expected to see the primitive ships explode in brilliant fireballs. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships moved, not the slow, predictable turns that every other species used in space combat. These vessels twisted and rolled like living things, accelerating in directions that should have been impossible. The energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space where the ships had been microseconds before. What? Scar Talon stared at his tactical display. How did they evade? Our targeting computers are perfect. His weapons officer was frantically checking his instruments. Sir, they're moving in 3-dimensional patterns. No ship should be able to change direction that quickly without tearing itself apart. On the bridge of the lead human destroyer, Captain Rodriguez smiled grimly. His crew was strapped into acceleration couches designed to handle forces that would kill most other species. They had trained for this their entire careers. Nice try, lizard boy, he said. Let's show them how Earth builds ships. All batteries return fire. The human destroyers opened fire with weapons the Vorthak didn't recognize. Instead of energy beams, they launched physical projectiles at incredible speeds. Railgun rounds and missile salvos streaked toward the Vorthak fleet. Kinetic weapons? Scar Talon laughed again. Do they think we're primitives? Our shields will stop their rocks easily. The first railgun rounds hit the Dominion's wrath. They punched through the energy shields like they weren't there, sending shockwaves through the massive ship. Alarms began blaring as hull breaches appeared on the tactical display. Impossible, Scar Talon roared. Our shields are rated against all known weapon types. His science officer was studying the readings with growing alarm. Sir, these projectiles are moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy is enormous. And, sir, they're using depleted uranium cores with tungsten penetrators. These mammals have weaponized heavy metals. More human ships joined the attack. Each vessel moved like a dancer, impossible to predict or target effectively. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, but they hit with the force of small asteroids. Vorthak ships began taking serious damage. On the research station, the Zephyrians watched in amazement. They had expected either a quick human defeat or a long, drawn-out battle. Instead, they were seeing something unprecedented. The mighty Vorthak fleet being outfought by smaller ships using simpler technology. How are they doing this? Crystal Song asked. Their ships are obviously less advanced than Vorthak vessels. Shimmer was recording everything, her scientific mind analyzing the battle. Look at their movement patterns. They're not following standard space combat doctrine. It's like they're treating 3-dimensional space as their natural environment. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system again. Dr. Shimmer, you and your people might want to secure yourselves. This could get rough. Before Shimmer could ask what she meant, the human fleet suddenly changed tactics. Instead of staying at long range, they began accelerating directly toward the Vorthak ships. To the Zephyrians, it looked like suicide. They're charging. Crystal Song couldn't believe it. Ships don't charge other ships in space combat. But the humans weren't just charging. As they closed distance, their formations spread out in a complex 3-dimensional pattern. Some ships dove below the Vorthak fleet. Others climbed above it while the main force drove straight through the center. Scar Talon was screaming orders that his crew couldn't follow. The human ships were everywhere at once, too close for the Vorthak's heavy weapons to track effectively. It was like trying to swat insects with a club. How do they coordinate their movements? His tactical officer asked in desperation. There's no central command ship, no obvious communication delays. They're acting like a hive mind. What the Vorthak didn't understand was that humans had evolved as pack hunters. Their brains were wired for group tactics and split-second coordination. Every human ship captain could predict what their companions would do because they all thought the same way. Captain Rodriguez lined up his destroyer with a Vorthak cruiser. "All hands brace for impact," he announced calmly. "Sir?" His weapons officer looked confused. "Are we ramming them?" "Negative. We're showing them what human engineering can do." The destroyer opened fire with everything it had at point-blank range. Railgun rounds, missiles, and particle beams struck the Vorthak ship's hull in a concentrated barrage. The enemy vessel's shields collapsed and secondary explosions began rippling along its length. But the Vorthak ship was still functional, still dangerous. So Captain Rodriguez did something that no other species would consider. He flew his ship directly through the explosion. The destroyer emerged from the fireball with scorch marks on its hull and several systems offline. But it was still flying, still fighting. The human crew was bruised but alive, protected by internal dampers and reinforced bulkheads. Scar Talon watched this display with growing horror. These mammals weren't just fighting his ships. They were ignoring damage that would cripple any sane crew. They seemed to treat deadly combat situations as normal operating conditions. "Sir?" His communications officer said nervously. "We're receiving messages from the other ships. They're requesting permission to withdraw." "Withdraw?" Scar Talon's voice was deadly quiet. "The Vorthak Empire does not withdraw from inferior species." But even as he said it, he could see the tactical situation deteriorating. His fleet was larger and more powerful, but the humans were fighting like nothing he had ever encountered. They took risks that were mathematically insane, performed maneuvers that should have killed their crews, and seemed to treat mortal danger as merely inconvenient. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos of battle. "Commander Scar Talon, you're losing ships and crew for no good reason. These researchers never hurt anyone. There's no honor in this fight. Stand down and we'll discuss terms." Scar Talon looked around his damaged bridge. 3 of his best ships were already destroyed, and the humans showed no signs of slowing down. But retreat was unthinkable. The High Command would execute him for cowardice. "Never," he snarled into the communicator. "The Vorthak Empire conquers or dies. There is no middle ground." Admiral Chen's response chilled him to his reptilian core. "Commander, you just made a very poor decision. All ships weapons free. Show them why Earth has no apex predators left." The human fleet suddenly changed again. Where before they had been precise and measured, now they attacked with pure savagery. Ships that had been holding back revealed hidden weapons. Destroyers that had seemed damaged suddenly accelerated beyond their supposed maximum speed. Scar Talon realized with growing terror that the humans had been holding back. This wasn't the space around Kelthera Prime had become a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zephyrians pressed against their viewing windows, watching in amazement as the human fleet tore through Vorthak ships with tactics that seemed to ignore basic physics and common sense. Captain Martinez of the destroyer Relentless was having the time of his life. His ship had taken 3 direct hits that should have disabled it, but his engineering crew had rerouted power through the coffee maker and somehow kept the weapons online. Sparks flew around his bridge. Half his crew was working in vacuum suits and the artificial gravity was flickering on and off. "Sir, we've lost main engines," his chief engineer reported over the intercom. "Also life support, navigation, and the forward hull is compromised. Can we still shoot?" Martinez asked. "Yes, sir." "Then we're still in this fight." What the Vorthak couldn't understand was that humans came from a world that had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. Earth was a planet of earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, ice ages, plagues, and predators. Humans had survived by becoming the most adaptable persistence hunters in the galaxy. Dr. Shimmer was recording everything through the station's sensors. Her scientific mind was struggling to process what she was seeing. "Crystal Song, look at this data," she said, her crystal body glowing with excitement and confusion. "The human ships are operating with systems failures that should make them non-functional. This destroyer has lost 60% of its hull integrity, but it's still maneuvering and fighting." Commander Crystal Song studied the readings. "How is that possible? Our ships would be dead in space with that much damage." "I think," Shimmer said slowly, We need to understand what kind of world these humans come from. She activated the communication system. Admiral Chen, may I ask a question? What type of environment did your species evolve in? Admiral Chen's voice came back between weapon commands. Earth is what we call a Class 12 death world, Doctor. High gravity, unstable weather, tectonic activity, and aggressive predators. Most galactic species would classify it as uninhabitable. Shimmer and Crystal Song looked at each other with growing understanding. No wonder the humans fought like this. They came from a world where survival itself was an extreme sport. On the Vorthak flagship, Commander Scartalon was learning the same lesson the hard way. His tactical officer was reading damage reports with a voice full of disbelief. Sir, the human destroyer Mongoose is moving to ram the cruiser Bloodfang. Impossible. That ship was disabled 10 minutes ago. Sir, it has no main power, no life support, and holes in 3 sections. But it's still moving. Scartalon watched in horror as the supposedly dead human ship slammed into one of his cruisers. The impact tore both vessels apart. But as the debris scattered, he could see small pods ejecting from the wreckage. The human crew was escaping in what looked like metal boxes with rocket engines. They planned for that, he whispered. They flew a suicide run and planned for surviving it. His weapons officer was monitoring human communications, trying to understand their tactics. Sir, I'm intercepting their battle chatter. They're not giving standard military orders. What are they saying? Things like, "Hey Martinez, watch this and someone hold my beer and that was awesome, do it again." Sir, I think they're enjoying this. Scartalon felt something he had never experienced before, fear. The Vorthak were conquerors because they were logical, efficient, and ruthless. But these humans were fighting like the concept of death was just an interesting challenge. The battle was revealing the fundamental difference between normal galactic warfare and human tactics. Most species had evolved on stable worlds where conflict was rare and survival was predictable. They fought wars with careful planning, overwhelming force, and minimal risk. Humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them constantly. They had learned to fight with whatever was available, take impossible risks, and treat certain death as just another problem to solve creatively. Captain Sarah Kim of the cruiser Determination was demonstrating this perfectly. Her ship had lost main propulsion, so she was using the maneuvering thrusters to perform combat roles that made her crew sick, but confused the enemy targeting computers. Engineering. "I need more speed," she called down. "Captain, we're already running the reactors at 110% capacity. Any more and we risk containment failure." Kim thought about this for exactly 2 seconds. "Make it 120%. If we blow up, at least we'll take some of them with us." Her crew didn't argue. They had trained for this their entire careers. Every human military academy taught courses called Survival in Impossible Situations and Creative Use of Limited Resources. Other species considered these subjects theoretical. Humans treated them as basic job skills. The Vorthak ship Terror's Edge was learning about human boarding tactics the hard way. A group of human Marines had somehow attached themselves to the hull using nothing but magnetic boots and cutting tools. They were burning their way through the armor with portable torches. "Sir," the ship's security chief reported to his captain, "the mammals are cutting through the hull in Section 7. "Impossible. That section is armored against all known weapons." "They're not using weapons, sir. They're using industrial cutting equipment." "And, sir," "they're not wearing proper spacesuits. They have some kind of emergency gear that looks like it was made from spare parts." The human Marines broke through the hull and poured into the Vorthak ship. They were indeed wearing jury-rigged emergency suits that would have been rejected by any safety inspector in the galaxy. But they worked, and that was all humans cared about. Sergeant Johnson led his squad through the Vorthak corridors, his suit's oxygen gauge showing red. 30 minutes of air left, people. Let's make them count." "Sarge, why don't we have proper boarding suits?" asked Private Chen. "Because proper suits cost money and the military spent the budget on more ammunition. Now stop complaining and plant those charges." The Marines moved through the ship like they had been born in zero gravity. They set explosive charges with the casual efficiency of construction workers and fought Vorthak security, forces with weapons that looked like they had been assembled in someone's garage. What the Vorthak didn't understand was that human military equipment was designed by people who assumed everything would break at the worst possible moment. Human soldiers trained to fight with broken gear, limited supplies, and no backup plan except improvise something. Back on the research station, Dr. Shimmer was beginning to understand what they had summoned. She accessed the human communication frequencies and listened to the chatter between ships. Relentless, this is determination. My engines are dead, but I've still got weapons. Want to try that slingshot maneuver we practiced? Copy that, determination. Remember, timing is everything. And try not to hit us this time. That was one time, Martinez. Shimmer turned to Crystal Song. They're improvising tactics in the middle of battle. Most species plan their operations for months before implementation. They're treating this like some kind of game, Crystal Song observed. On the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Chen was monitoring the battle with the calm satisfaction of someone watching a well-rehearsed performance. Her crew was working with the efficient chaos that characterized human operations everywhere. Admiral, the Vorthak are requesting parley, her communications officer reported. Put them through. Commander Skartalin's voice came through the speakers, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. Admiral Chen, I propose we discuss terms for ending this conflict. I already gave you terms, Commander. Withdraw your forces and leave the researchers alone. You don't understand. The Vorthak Empire cannot simply withdraw. We have obligations, honor codes, political considerations. Admiral Chen's voice cut him off. Commander, let me explain something about human psychology. We evolved on a world where the weather could kill us. The ground could swallow us, and dinner usually had bigger teeth than we did. We learned to survive by being too stubborn to die and too crazy to quit. She paused to let this sink in. You're attacking peaceful scientists who never hurt anyone. That makes you the bad guys, and humans have a real problem with bad guys. We tend to get creative about stopping them. As if to emphasize her point, the destroyer Mongoose's escape pods had somehow rigged themselves with magnetic grapples and were attaching to another Vorthak ship. The survivors of the supposedly destroyed vessel were continuing the fight with hand, weapons, and portable charges. Skartalin watched this impossible display and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. All ships, implement tactical withdrawal to minimum safe distance. Send immediate priority message to High Command. Request Grand Fleet deployment. His tactical officer stared at him. Sir, you're calling for the Grand Fleet? For one system? Look at your sensor readings, Skartalin said quietly. We've lost 30 ships to their smaller force. These aren't normal opponents. They fight like the void itself wants to kill them, and they smile while doing it. As the Vorthak fleet began its withdrawal, Admiral Chen's voice followed them across space. Smart choice, Commander, but this isn't over. Those researchers are under human protection now. Anyone who wants to hurt them will have... High Admiral Deathclaw stood in the center of the Vorthak Supreme Command Chamber, his massive reptilian form towering over the tactical displays. The chamber itself was a monument to Vorthak power. Black metal walls covered with the symbols of conquered worlds, and holographic displays showing their vast empire stretching across dozens of star systems. Explain this again, Deathclaw said, his voice like grinding stone. A single fleet of primitives defeated 200 of our ships? Commander Skartalin's image flickered on the communication screen. Even through the hologram, his fear was visible. Supreme Admiral, these mammals are not like any species we have encountered. They use kinetic weapons that should be obsolete, but somehow penetrate our shields. Their ships move in ways that violate tactical doctrine. And, sir, they seem to enjoy combat. Deathclaw's eyes narrowed. Enjoy combat? Explain. They communicate during battle using phrases like, "This is fun," and "Let's try something crazy." When their ships are disabled, the crews continue fighting. I watched a human vessel ram one of our cruisers deliberately, and the crew survived the collision in emergency pods, then used those pods to attack another ship. The other Vorthak admirals in the chamber looked at each other with growing disbelief. In their experience, civilized species fought wars to achieve specific goals with minimal loss. The idea of troops who enjoyed fighting was disturbing. Sir, Skartalin continued, I recommend we classify these humans as a Class A threat and avoid further contact. Their behavior patterns suggest they may be suffering from species-wide mental instability. Deathclaw's laugh was a terrifying sound. Mental instability? These mammals defeated you with inferior technology and smaller numbers. That sounds like superior tactics, not insanity. He turned to his intelligence officer. What do we know about these humans? Very little, sir. They claim to come from something called the Terran Defense Fleet. Their homeworld appears to be designated as Earth in their language. Long-range sensors suggest it's a high-gravity world with an active core and unstable weather systems. A death world, Deathclaw mused. That explains some of their behavior. Species that evolve on dangerous worlds often develop unusual survival traits. His tactical advisor stepped forward. Sir, regardless of their origins, they have interfered with our conquest operations. If we allow this to stand, other species might think the Vorthak Empire can be challenged. Deathclaw considered this. The Vorthak Empire was built on fear and the certainty of overwhelming force. Any sign of weakness would encourage rebellion among their subject species. Assemble the Grand Armada, he ordered. Full deployment. I want 1,500 ships, including the dreadnoughts. We will demonstrate to these mammals and the rest of the galaxy that the Vorthak Empire cannot be challenged by primitives with obsolete weapons. Meanwhile, in the Kelthara system, Admiral Chen was receiving her own reinforcements. The message from Earth Command had been brief but encouraging. Reinforcement fleet dispatched under Admiral Rodriguez. Mission parameters: diplomatic protection and cultural exchange with Zephyrian researchers. Secondary objective: demonstrate human hospitality to any aggressive neighbors. Admiral Chen smiled at that last part. Earth Command had a talent for understated threat assessment. The human fleet had been busy since the battle. Engineering teams were helping repair the research station, while medical units provided assistance to injured Zephyrians. The cultural exchange was proving fascinating for both species. Dr. Shimmer was conducting her first formal interview with a human crew member. Sergeant Johnson sat across from her in the station's medical bay, still wearing his jury-rigged spacesuit with the helmet off. Sergeant, may I ask about your thoughts during the boarding action? Shimmer asked, her crystal body glowing with scientific curiosity. Johnson shrugged. Honestly, Doc, I was mostly thinking about my oxygen supply. 30 minutes isn't much time to clear a ship and get back to safety. But you were entering a hostile vessel filled with armed enemies. Weren't you afraid? Well, sure. But being afraid is just information. It tells you that you're doing something dangerous, not that you should stop doing it. Shimmer made notes in her research pad. Your species treats fear as data, pretty much. Back on Earth, everything is dangerous. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the ground sometimes. If we stopped doing things because they were scary, we'd never leave our houses. And even our houses aren't really safe. Earthquakes, floods, tornadoes. Your homeworld sounds like a constant threat to survival. Johnson laughed. It keeps life interesting. Plus, it means that when we get to space and meet hostile aliens, we're like, oh, is that all? At least they don't have venomous fangs and the ability to fly. In another part of the station, Commander Crystalsong was learning about human military rations. Captain Martinez had generously shared his meal pack, which contained something called beef stew and chocolate cake. This food comes from animals? Crystalsong asked, his crystal body flickering with confusion and mild horror. The beef part, yeah. Cows. Big, peaceful animals that we raise for food. The chocolate is from a plant, though. And you consume the flesh of other living creatures regularly? Martinez paused with a spoonful halfway to his mouth. Yes? I mean, we eat plants too. Humans are omnivores. We eat pretty much anything that doesn't eat us first. Actually, sometimes we eat things that do try to eat us first. Ever heard of shark? Crystalsong's light dimmed further. Your species consumes predators? Well, only after we catch them. It's usually the other way around. They try to eat us, we try not to get eaten, and sometimes we win. Then we make soup. This conversation was being recorded for the Zephyrian Cultural Archives. Future xenobiologists would spend decades trying to understand how a species could be simultaneously peaceful enough to help strangers and aggressive enough to eat their predators. Admiral Chen was in her ready room when the communication from Admiral Rodriguez arrived. His face appeared on her screen, grinning with the expression of someone who had just been given an interesting new assignment. Sarah, I hear you've been making friends with the locals. Hello, Miguel. Yes, the Zephyrians are remarkable people. Peaceful, intelligent, and they make excellent tea from crystallized starlight. How's the reinforcement fleet looking? 300 ships and some very excited crew members. Word has gotten out that we're dealing with an aggressive empire that thinks they can pick on civilian researchers. The Marines are practically bouncing off the bulkheads. Admiral Chen nodded. The human military attracted a specific type of person. Individuals who viewed dangerous situations as interesting, challenges and impossible odds as personal insults. What's Our tactical assessment of this Vorthak Empire. Standard galactic conquerors as far as we can tell. They rely on overwhelming force and intimidation. Their ships are larger than ours, but built for fighting other civilized species. They're not really prepared for our approach to combat, which is, hit them with everything we have, then make up new tactics when that stops working. Dr. Shimmer interrupted their conversation with an urgent communication. Admiral Chen, our long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet approaching the system. Preliminary count suggests over 1,000 ships. Admiral Chen and Admiral Rodriguez looked at each other through the screen. Both were experienced military officers who understood what this meant. Well, Rodriguez said calmly. Looks like they decided to escalate. Should be interesting. How long until your fleet arrives? Chen asked. 6 hours. Think you can keep things entertaining until then? Admiral Chen smiled. Miguel, these are humans you're talking to. We've been keeping things entertaining since we invented fire. On the approaching Vorthak Grand Armada, High Admiral Deathclaw was reviewing intelligence reports about the human fleet. What he read made him increasingly confident in his decision to bring overwhelming force. 127 primitive vessels, he told his staff. Chemical propulsion, kinetic weapons, and fusion reactors. Our Grand Armada has plasma cannons, antimatter missiles, and energy shields that could stop a planet-killer weapon. His tactical officer nodded agreement. Sir, even if these humans have unusual tactics, simple mathematics favors us. 1,500 ships against 127 is not a fair fight. Exactly, Deathclaw said. We will demonstrate, to the galaxy, what happens when primitives challenge the Vorthak Empire. Neither Deathclaw nor his officers had any experience fighting a species that considered unfair fights to be the only kind worth having. As the massive Vorthak fleet approached Kelthera Prime, Admiral Chen opened communication channels to both the Zephyrian station and Admiral Rodriguez's incoming reinforcements. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We have incoming hostiles, approximately 1,500 Vorthak vessels. Our mission parameters remain unchanged. Protect the research station and demonstrate human diplomatic protocol to any aggressive neighbors. Captain Martinez's voice came through the comm. Admiral, 1,500 ships seems like a lot for a diplomatic demonstration. Captain, that's exactly the right number for the kind of diplomacy we practice. All ships prepare for extended engagement. And remember, we have civilians watching. Let's show them what human protection looks like. Dr. Shimmer was monitoring the communications with growing amazement. The humans were outnumbered more than the space around Kelthera Prime became the stage for the largest battle in galactic history. High Admiral Deathclaw's Grand Armada emerged from hyperspace like a wall of dark metal. 1,500 ships arranged in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with weapon ports and energy shields, a display of power that had convinced dozens of species to surrender without fighting. Admiral Chen's fleet looked tiny in comparison. 127 human ships hung in space near the research station, their white hulls marked with blue Earth symbols. To any reasonable observer, the outcome was obvious. Dr. Shimmer and Commander Crystalsong watched from the station's main observation deck, along with hundreds of other Zephyrian researchers. They had sent their children to the deepest parts of the station, but the adults remained to witness what might be the final battle of their lives. The human fleet is moving, Crystalsong observed. Instead of forming defensive positions around the station, the human ships were spreading out in a pattern that made no tactical sense. Some moved above the Vorthak formation, others below, while a third group positioned themselves directly between the enemy, fleet and the research station. High Admiral Deathclaw studied the human deployment with contempt. They're spreading their forces. Basic military doctrine says you concentrate firepower, not scatter it. These mammals truly are primitives. His weapons officer was running final targeting calculations. Sir, we have firing solutions on all enemy vessels. Shall we demonstrate our power by destroying a few ships first? No, Deathclaw said. We will destroy them all at once. Complete annihilation. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who challenge the Vorthak Empire. Admiral Chen's voice cut through space on all frequencies. Hi, Admiral Deathclaw, final warning. Withdraw your forces now. You're about to make a mistake that will cost you everything. Deathclaw's laughter was broadcast back. Admiral Chen, you command a tiny fleet against the might of our Grand Armada. What could you possibly do to threaten us? Admiral Chen's response was calm and certain. We're about to show you why Earth has no apex predators left. All ships, she continued on the human fleet frequency. You know the mission. Those researchers down there called for help and we answered. Nobody gets past us, nobody hurts the civilians, and nobody goes home disappointed. Weapons free. Show them what human protection looks like. The battle began with Deathclaw's order to fire everything at once. 1,500 Vorthak ships opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of energy beams and plasma bolts that should have vaporized the entire human fleet in seconds. But the human ships were no longer where the targeting computers said they should be. Captain Martinez pulled his destroyer through a spiral that should have killed his crew from the acceleration forces. His people were pressed deep into their crash couches, grinning through the pain. That's what I call a close shave, he called out as energy beams passed through the space they had occupied milliseconds before. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're reading 15 Gs of acceleration. That's beyond safe limits. Safe limits are for people who want to live boring lives, Martinez replied. Engineering, I need more speed. Captain, we're already running everything at 150% capacity. The engines shouldn't be able to handle this. Then we're exactly where we want to be. Fire everything we've got. The human fleet's response was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. Instead of the measured, predictable tactics used by every other species, the humans attacked like a pack of wolves that had learned to fly spaceships. Admiral Rodriguez's reinforcement fleet arrived in the middle of the chaos, dropping out of hyperspace directly behind the Vorthak formation. His 300 ships immediately joined the battle with the enthusiasm of people who had been traveling for hours just to join the fun. Sarah, Rodriguez called over the communication channel. Sorry we're late. Traffic was terrible. Better late than never, Miguel. How do you want to play this? I brought some new toys. Ever seen what a full carrier group can do against traditional fleet formations? The experimental carrier Valkyrie launched its fighter wings into the battle, but these weren't ordinary fighters. They were drone squadrons controlled by human pilots who treated the engagement like the most advanced video game ever created. Lieutenant Sarah Kim sat in the Valkyrie's control center, her hands dancing over multiple control interfaces. She was simultaneously piloting 12 combat drones through the Vorthak fleet, each one performing maneuvers that would have been impossible with a living pilot aboard. This is like playing 12 games of chess at once, she said happily. Except the chess pieces explode. Her drones swarmed through the enemy formation like angry insects. Too small and fast for the Vorthak's heavy weapons to track effectively, they attached themselves to enemy hulls and detonated, or slipped through shield generators to attack internal systems. On the Vorthak flagship, Deathclaw was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. His tactical display showed a battle that violated every principle of space combat he had ever learned. Sir, his weapons officer reported, the human ships are fighting at distances and speeds that should be impossible. They're pulling 30G turns and surviving direct hits that should destroy them. How is this possible? I believe, sir, that they come from a much more dangerous world than we assumed. Their ships are built to survive conditions that would kill crews from any normal species. Deathclaw watched as a human cruiser lost its entire forward section to a plasma blast but continued fighting with its remaining weapons. The crew was somehow still alive and functional despite damage that should have been instantly fatal. Their damage control capabilities are beyond our understanding, his science officer added. They appear to have redundant systems for their redundant systems. And sir, they're routing power through their coffee machines. Through their what? Coffee machines, sir. It's apparently a device for preparing stimulant beverages. They've turned their food preparation equipment into backup power generators. Admiral Chen was demonstrating why humans were considered the galaxy's most adaptable species. When her flagship's main weapons were disabled, she ordered her crew to launch the ship's entire supply of maintenance drones, each one loaded with improvised explosives. Captain Thompson, she called to one of her destroyer commanders, your ship looks pretty beat up. How are you holding together? Admiral, we've lost life support, artificial gravity, and the hull is compromised in 7 sections. But the guns still work and we've got plenty of ammunition. We're good for another few hours of this. What the Vorthak couldn't comprehend was that humans had evolved on a world where good enough was often the difference between survival and extinction. Their ships were designed by engineers who assumed everything would break at the worst possible moment. So they built in backups for the backups and trained their crews to fight with whatever still worked. The tide of battle began to turn when Admiral Rodriguez implemented the Sol Gambit, a maneuver that used the system's star to accelerate his ships beyond safe limits. It was a tactic that required split-second timing and a willingness to risk everything on a single move. All ships prepare for stellar slingshot maneuver, Rodriguez announced. We're going to use the star's gravity to boost our velocity beyond anything the Vorthak can track. Sir, his navigation officer said nervously, the gravitational stresses will be enormous. If we miscalculate by even a fraction, we'll either crash into the star or tear our ships apart. Then we'd better not miscalculate. Rodriguez replied cheerfully. The human fleet dove toward the star in a formation that looked like organized suicide. Vorthak's sensors lost track of them in the stellar radiation, only to have them reappear minutes later moving at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Deathclaw watched in horror as human vessels slammed into his fleet like relativistic projectiles. Ships that had seemed disabled suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems. Crews that should have been dead kept fighting with whatever equipment they could jury-rig. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, we're receiving surrender requests from 47 of our ships. Surrender? The Vorthak do not surrender. Sir, the captains are reporting that their crews refuse to continue fighting. They say the humans are not normal, and that continuing this battle is suicide. Deathclaw's own ship shuddered as human marines somehow managed to breach the hull using nothing but magnetic charges and portable cutting tools. His security forces were reporting that the boarders were fighting through the ship with weapons that looked like they had been assembled from spare parts. Sergeant Johnson led his squad through the Vorthak flagship's corridors, his damaged spacesuit held together with duct tape and determination. 30 seconds of air left, people. Let's make it count. Sarge, Private Chen called out, why do we always get the impossible missions? Because we're the only ones crazy enough to volunteer for them. Now stop talking and plant those charges. The Marines reached the flagship's bridge just as Deathclaw was preparing to activate his ship's self-destruct system. The massive Vorthak admiral turned to face the humans, expecting to see